There's a billboard outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, paid for by the DNC that says you are powered by Trump and MAGA. What's your response?
The DNC is saying because one of my PACs, which I have nothing to do with, legally can have nothing to do with, accepted money from a traditionally Republican donor, that somehow this should disqualify me from people voting for me. We get money from Democrats, from Republicans and independents, and I'm proud that we're reaching across party lines, that we're trying to bridge the divide. President Biden says that he's trying to bridge the divide, but this is just the opposite. It's saying that there's a big difference in that you're not really American if you're Republican, and I just don't believe that. I think we ought to have presidential candidates that are receiving support across political divides. We need to bridge the divide and heal this country.
You've chosen not to attack other candidates. They've attacked you, the Democrats in particular. Why do you think they're doing that?
Why do I think they're? I think that they don't. They have a candidate who doesn't want to debate, and so they have to try to win the election by litigating against people, by trying to get people off the ballot, by denying me ballot access, by litigating against the other candidates to get them disqualified. So we won't have to do democracy in our country. And I feel like we should be modeling democracy around the world. I don't want to win this election because I'm not a fan of President Trump's. I don't want to win this election by disqualifying him legally. I want the American people to decide who they want to have as president, and I want to beat him fair and square on a level playing field. And I think it's distressing that the Democrats don't.
Is there any particular political issue he speaks to that you're especially attracted to him over?
Many things: our healthcare system, our housing, our education, the things that are going on with immigrants in this country. He speaks to all of those things. I'm a working parent. I'm a single working mother, and I totally love the values that he speaks on about that and the things that are happening, especially with our healthcare and our costs.
Absolutely. He did mention a lot of that tonight. Many in the mainstream and establishment media attack him over the way he talks about the COVID vaccine, among other vaccines. Do you like how he talks about
I think
vaccines?
it's truthful. I just think it's truthful, and I think it's honest.
Absolutely. The mainstream media also talks a lot about him as a spoiler candidate, especially in the swing state of Michigan here.
I've heard that.
What do you think of that stuff?
I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true at all. I think that he means the things that he says, and I think he's going to do his best if he's elected into office. I think he really is going to do those things.
In the vein of him being a spoiler, can I ask you who you supported in 2020?
Actually, I went for Biden. I did go for Biden in 2020.
Is there something Biden could do or say now to win you back over? Why'd you sour on him?
I really don't think he can at this point right now. I just like the initiatives right now that Mr. Kennedy has. I feel those work best, I think, with my life and with my family.
Absolutely. The word on the street is that Joe Biden's particularly vulnerable here in Michigan because of his position on Israel and the large Arab and Muslim population here.
Sure.
Have you heard this stuff? What do you think about his position, Biden's position on Israel? And
I
as
really
a supporter
can't
of
speak
his,
too much about, I really can't speak too much about his position on that. I just think that whole situation is a total mess, and I think that we need a lot of help in many areas, especially right here in Michigan in our USA. But I do think it's unfortunate the things that are going on overseas.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, so as we near Election Day, I know it's like 8 or some odd months away, if RFK, all three of them were on the ballot, you would end up supporting RFK Jr., although he may act as taking away from Biden or Trump?
Absolutely, I would. I would definitely support him. I just really don't see anything good coming out of either two candidates that we have. For me, I just don't believe that their values really speak to what I'm about.
And if you ultimately don't get the choice and RFK Jr. drops out prior, and we're between Trump and Biden, are you leaning one way or another between the two?
I would definitely have to still go back with Biden, reluctantly. I just don't think that Trump is the person for
I
it.
did notice you are wearing a Free Palestine and Ceasefire Now sweatshirt.
I sure am.
Kennedy's position on Israel-Palestine has been exceptionally pro-Israel. He's called Hamas a terrorist group. He hasn't called for a ceasefire. What's your reaction to his positions on that?
That is the one thing that we have a disagreement on. But that's totally fine. We can work together to get past that disagreement. If I had the chance to talk to him, I would sit down with him and just explain the situation, how 25,000 people are dead. And my government is paying for that. That's very important to me.
Absolutely. He does call Hamas a terrorist organization. Would you agree with him on that?
That is a very tricky situation because when you label someone a terrorist organization, it's a way to just sidestep the issue. The real issue is the death. The real issue is that our government is paying for those bombs. So are they a terrorist? Are there members of Hamas that are terrorists? That's absolutely true. But overall, the Palestinian people, regardless, at the end of the day, are suffering. Yeah. And so are the Israelis. The Israeli people are suffering too.
And despite his pro-Israel position, could you see yourself supporting him?
I can see myself supporting him because I know that if we can come together on the other issues that our country is struggling with, we can come together on this. We can come together if we work together.
Absolutely. RFK has been spoken a lot about as a spoiler candidate. If he weren't the one to eventually make it, if he didn't eventually make it to November and it were between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, between those two, are you leaning one way or another?
If it was only between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, my conscience struggles so much. I'm such pain to have to choose between those ones. But for the better of the country, if I had to decide, I would pick Joe Biden.
Wow. Is that who you voted for in the previous election too?
That is who I voted for in the last election.
And that is, again, despite Joe Biden being one of the most pro-Israel presidents in history right now,
Yes, and that's why I struggled with it. That's why I cried about it. That's why I prayed about it. Because I care about that issue deeply. But I must put myself aside and do what's best for the country. Because I know we can come together on that issue. We can see both sides, and we can see that the death of the Palestinians must be addressed.
But then let me, this will be my final question. If all three of them were to make it to November, would you actually cast your vote for RFK, although he may act as a spoiler here in the state?
Even though he may be labeled as a spoiler, I think that the vital thing for every American is to vote with their conscience. Wow. And I cannot vote with my conscience if I vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump.
Wow. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The position he has that you're politically drawn to him over?
Getting us out of war, getting us back, getting everyone home from overseas, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned getting us out of war. I know he's very unconventional, non-establishment on his position on Ukraine.
Yeah.
He's called it a money laundering scheme, wants to stop sending money to him. Can you tell me what you think about that?
I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, 20 years of Afghanistan, I think, should have told us that. It's just like we jumped out of one war and jumped right back in another one less than a year later. I saw that coming when Biden got elected, so it's just like, I mean, when's it going to end, you know?
Can I ask what would your reaction be to Ukrainians who are saying, Russians illegally invaded us, Putin's committing war crimes in Ukraine, and we need American help?
I would say we don't have a dog in that fight, personally. That's really all I would leave it at. We don't have a dog in that fight. We don't have any interest in that land. I mean, I think we've all heard the Tucker Carlson Putin interview. I watched it just because, you'll never get that perspective anywhere else. And it's just like, he makes points, It's just like, we have no interest, thousands of miles. It's like, why did we go to Vietnam type thing, It doesn't make sense.
Many in the media talk about him as a spoiler candidate. Can I ask who you supported in 2020?
I didn't vote 2020.
Didn't vote in 2020?
Yeah.
Is there anything Joe Biden or Trump could do to win over your support away from him in 2024? Michigan's a key swing state in the upcoming election.
Biden can't do anything but just leave. There's nothing they could do. Nothing. They got zero from me.
Yeah.
I mean, up till 2016, I was voting blue no matter who, just because that's how I was. I mean, after that, a lot's changed for everybody, and I just got more. I paid attention more. I listened to people more.
If it comes down to Donald Trump v. Joe Biden, RFK doesn't make it to November, are you leaning one way or another between those two?
You can still write it in.
Is that what you do?
I mean, if that's the choice, you could do. If they're going to take, a candidate that you want to run for president off the ballot, who's to say you can't write it on the ballot,
But I mean, that would kind of act like a spoiler vote in an election, in a swing state that's very important.
That makes sense, but at the same time, you have to vote with your values, You can't, I mean, it's just, you got to vote with your values, and it's just, if it's one or the other, that's really, you're just a sheep in the line, just being herded to one.
So we're out here today in Grand Rapids, Michigan, ahead of this RFK Jr. rally. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you decided to come out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a localist at heart. I think that communities can solve their own problems. Neighbors just need to do a better job of looking out for each other. And there's very few national figures who give me hope, and RFK is one of those figures.
Wow. Is there something in particular, policy-wise, that he does or says that makes you especially drawn to him?
I'm a member of Gen Z, and I think a lot of members of my generation We support conservative policies, but socially we're very tolerant, even more on the liberal side of things. And Bobby cuts it right down the middle for me.
Absolutely. I know there's a lot of talk about him being a so-called spoiler candidate. Have you heard this stuff? What do you make of that?
I think if the people wake up and realize that they're the ones who really have the power, that he can win, and he won't spoil it.
Absolutely. If he didn't get to November, and it were between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, as polls are showing it likely will be, are you leaning one way or another between those two?
Not really. I hate to say it, but it's a lesser of two evils situation, and I don't think that's what our democracy should be.
So is that fair to say you're undecided between Trump and Biden if it came down to that in the crucial state here in Michigan?
I think it's safe to say I'm 100% in for Bobby.
Wow. Is there something that Joe Biden or Donald Trump could do to win over your support?
Trump would really have to change his rhetoric, but I don't think you can separate Trump from the rhetoric. It's part of his brand. And I just don't think Joe Biden's fit for office at this point.
You said Trump's rhetoric writ large. Is there something specific that he says or an issue that he talks about that frustrates you in particular?
The president should be a reflection of the American people and our ideals. I might have a disagreement with our neighbor, but am I going to call them a bastard or make fun of their disabilities? Absolutely not.
There's something that the mainstream media likes to complain a lot about Kennedy, and then it's how he talks about the COVID vaccine and its effectiveness. Have you heard this stuff? What do you make about his position on the COVID vax?
I think his position's pretty reasonable in the sense that he's not against vaccinations. He himself is vaccinated. His children are vaccinated. He just thinks there needs to be a more honest conversation about the risks associated with vaccines. And I think that goes for everything. What we put into our bodies, what we eat. There's a laundry list of chemicals that are legal in the United States that are illegal in Europe and Australia, all around the world.
One other issue that the mainstream media complains that he talks about a lot is his positions on Ukraine.
Sure.
He's called it a money laundering scheme. What do you think? He says he doesn't want to continue to support Ukraine militarily. What do you think about his position on Ukraine?
I think the military-industrial complex will always find a way to make a profit, and unfortunately the Ukrainian conflict is the most recent embodiment of that. I mean, it's difficult. It depends what lens you want to look at the conflict from. I'm a farmer. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. I could see it where maybe Russia takes over Ukraine and then the grain prices go up for farmers. That'd be good for Americans, but it's not good from a humanitarian perspective. Also, he could take over Ukraine and flood the grain market with a cheap product, which would destroy American agriculture, global agriculture, for that matter.
I guess, how would you respond to people who support Ukraine or somebody who likes Zelensky, if RFK got elected to office, came to him and asked, it says Russia invaded us brutally, massacred our people, committed war crimes in Bucha. We need your help to help fend off, this invasion.
I think for a long time America has tried to be the sword of democracy, slashing our way, trying to plant seeds. That's not how democracy works. And I think the people of Ukraine deserve, to rule themselves if that's truly what they want, and judging from the fight they're putting up, that's what they want. I mean, there's been atrocities committed historically by the Russians in Ukraine, such as the Holodomor in the 1930s or 40s, so I'm honestly not very decided on it myself. It depends what lens you need to look at it from, and I think from a humanitarian lens, it's a tragedy.
Absolutely. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to mention?
Vote for Kennedy.